I sent you, I want to make sure that you got the conversation on Friday.
Good morning, John and Victoria. If you would please go ahead and test your audio for me and your video, that would be great.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Sorry about the delay.
Oh, no worries.
Eileen, I didn't see the script.
Let me resend that to you. Hold on just one moment.
All right, thanks. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, you have it?
I did find it.
Perfect.
Just let me know when you want me to begin.
Everyone is present, so if you'd like to start, that would be great.
All right, I'm going to move my camera over just a little bit. Okay, welcome everyone, and to the June 8th meeting of the Economic Development Subcommittee. And Madam Host, could you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Member Fleming?
Present.
Thank you. Member Alvarez?
Present.
Member Sawyer?
Here.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that everyone is present.
Excellent, thank you very much. And what I'd like to do first is ask if there is public comment on topics not listed on our agenda today.
We do not have any public comment for this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. So if you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please select and raise the hand button. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker has 3 minutes. A countdown timer will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you are invited to do so. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. And this information is for those that wish to make comment later in our agenda. So I am going to move to our standard agenda. And Raisa, would you like to discuss new business?
We have no new business.
Okay, there you go. So we have a general plan visioning session. Is Amy on? Do we have Amy?
We do.
Okay. Amy, would you like to introduce this visioning session?
Good morning. I'd love to. So you may have heard this because we have hosted district workshops with all the council members present. But today I did want to provide a quick presentation on our general plan visioning process, which is one of the first stages. And we've just done a lot of community outreach on this and engagement. So I do have a brief presentation for you today on this.
Excellent.
Are you
Thank you.
ready to get started?
Yes.
All right. Give me 1 second and I'll share my screen here. Let's see here. All right, has everyone seen my presentation?
Yes, I see it.
Great. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. So our general plan process is very big picture. So this is really looking at how our communities are created and all the physical components. So schools, shopping, freeways, where you live, how you define your community, where's downtown, all of those different things. But it doesn't only just deal with the physical components, but also the social components. So we also look at education and access to, Marian, please, excuse me 1 second. I have kids home for the summer and they are full of energy. And so we do want to make sure that the community has an opportunity. Please leave and close the door. Thank you. Thank you. Close the door. Okay, thank you. Apologies. So we are looking at not just the physical, but the social pieces as well. So our general plan process really only happens once every 10 years or so. So we're asking the community what they want to see in 2050. And we've been really excited and what we've heard. And so we're going to share a little bit about what we've heard today. And then just to give you an overview of what process we're in, this is a 3-year process and it will conclude in 2023. So we are just here right now. And so our next phase will be looking at different land use and circulation alternatives And then we'll go into policy development and environmental review. And then it'll come forward to Planning Commission and City Council in 2023 for consideration of adoption. So it's a long process, and we'll be coming to the public at various points of the process to engage and get comments. And so it's exciting. This process also includes an update for our climate action plan. It will include an update to our housing element, and also incorporates policy related to environmental justice and safety. And it also, we do have a grant from Kaiser Permanente to do health equity and outreach and engagement with our vulnerable populations. So a couple other key pieces of this is, one, our Community Advisory Committee. We have a group of 25 that are not only our liaisons, but are also a group that really helps us understand where we should be reaching out to. So we really get a full engagement opportunity with our community. So we are looking to fill a couple remaining seats on this Community Advisory Committee. So if there are people on the line who are interested, or if you know others in the community, we are just accepting applications just for a couple more days before we conclude that and then move those forward towards potential appointments. And then we also have a technical advisory committee, which are really our technical leads from various departments of the city, from other governments, from transportation components such as SMART and our Sonoma County Transportation Authority. And so this group has been with us throughout this process so far as well, and will continue. And so we really do rely on that CAC, the Community Advisory Committee, and then our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee. So we do have a robust website that's available, and this is going to be our one-stop shop for the whole project ongoing. So there's a lot of good data on here, which we'll talk about a little bit. And as we post surveys for the community, or if you just want to provide input, this is a great place to go. And then we also have our community vision workshops that just concluded. So this was one piece of the activities that we did during this event set. And the 10 workshops was really our effort to get down to that neighborhood level. We did host at least one workshop in each district. We do really appreciate all the input that you all provided and the engagement that you helped us get. So we also did some Spanish only meetings and then bilingual meetings as part of this. This is just a little snippet of what we saw and what we heard. So we did have our first workshop that was posted in February that recently closed. We had over 1,300 people reply to the survey, which was a great response. We have another one out now, so we hope to beat that. But the responses on this were very interesting because we did ask people to map their neighborhood, and we'll continue to use this data, but we really wanted to hear from people what they considered to be the heart of their neighborhood. How big of an area do people consider to be their neighborhood? So it was really kind of an interesting thing to ask and to get responses on. And when we asked about what the heart of people's neighborhoods were, we did hear that the heart is really where they live. So the middle of their neighborhood, but also where people get shop services and retail. So a lot of neighborhoods have a little node of retail activity. But also there's also places like a park or a church or a school that can reflect part of that community. And then we also talked about what are the most important changes you would like to see in Santa Rosa. And so of top of mind for a lot of folks have been our fires. So natural hazards have really come forward. And then also just housing for all. And then also our community public services and amenities, and then economic job growth. And then we asked what excites people about Santa Rosa. And this was also a fun question to get responses on, because it really shows the optimism and resilience of our community. But we did hear a lot about affordable housing and that housing for all, and then also just the protection of our natural resources being those top recipients. And then we also are moved into our vision statements that we provided to the public as really a starting point, just to gauge how people felt about these various words and the statements that went behind them. These were originally developed based on conversations we had with our community advisory committee, with our technical team, and among our staff team, and some of the various community workshops that we had up to the point of our district workshops. And so we wanted to put something out there for people to react to. So these draft vision statements were provided, and we were able to get a lot of great feedback. And we will be talking about these draft vision statements a little bit here, and then I won't give it all away, but we will be coming to the Planning Commission and City Council at a joint meeting in July to really talk about what we heard and to get feedback on the final set of vision statements. So the first set of vision statements, I'm just going to go through. Inclusive and just being two of these words. And so that's really representing the just equity for all and providing opportunity for people to engage with our government and understanding where the barriers are to participation. And then just really representing the impact of environmental justice and the need in our community, and making sure that we have the opportunity related to the built environment and how that impacts people's lives and health. And speaking of health, this was a big component of what we heard. And we do want to make sure that in the future, our neighborhoods are healthy and vibrant, and then also resilient, which was a word that really caused a lot of conversation in our district workshops. I think this word has meant a lot for a lot of different people, and sometimes people weren't really sure what it was meant to represent. But resilient in this framework is really looking at the ability for our community to bounce back, but also for our city and the services to be able to restore infrastructure, and we have sustainable efforts there. And then we also want prepared and sheltered. So prepared, really looking at the awareness of what natural hazards we have in our community, and making sure that we have not just a city preparedness, but a community preparedness. And then sheltered, a diverse mix of high quality, safe, well-designed housing at all different affordability levels. And then equitable, so making sure that you're convenient and access is open for all in our community. Successful and connected. So successful really being that representative of the economic piece, and making sure that in the future we do have a thriving economy that will be able to sustain and provide opportunities for all. And then connected, so that multimodal, reliable opportunities for not just transit, but bike and pedestrian. So really that full gamut of opportunity there. Then we also have safe and educated. So safe, not just for our public or personal safety, but public safety as well, making sure that we feel safe in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And then educated, making sure that we have opportunity for education for all, and that we have a connected community to really be able to support that. So these draft vision statements conclude with just these two. So cultural and sustainable. Cultural, our ability to really celebrate our rich culture and heritage we have here in Santa Rosa and in Sonoma County. And then sustainable, so our natural resources and making sure that we are able to protect the resources that we have and be able to access those open space areas for our community. So the next steps with these vision statements, as I noted, is July 20th, we will be coming to the City Council and Planning Commission for a study session. And we will be looking for feedback, and there's still time for the community to give us feedback as well. So we are right now, we've been going to a variety of different community organizations, and we have also on agendas for our other various boards and commissions. So we want to get as much awareness out there and as much input as we can, because these vision statements really do lay out foundation for the remaining policy work for this general plan effort. So it's an important piece and a really exciting piece to hear from the community on what people would like. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Good job. Thank you, Amy. You know, when I attended the meeting in my district, you know, even though there wasn't a ton of people, the respondents were engaged and really added a lot of richness to the process and the conversation. So it's not, and I mentioned it that night, it's really not about the quantity of people that are attending, because, you know, all sorts of people could attend that are minorly interested. These are people these are, you know, residents that are really engaged and want to make a difference. So it was rewarding to hear their responses. And I know that the experience was made richer again by their attendance. So it was, I would call it a great success, the one that I was able to attend last. Any questions or comments, Eddie or Victoria? Seeing none, we thank you, Amy, very much. And so what is the next meeting? What district are you meeting next in?
So we've actually concluded all of our district meetings. So now we are going to boards and commissions, and then we have quite a lot of community meetings on the books. So although we've had, I can't remember how many attended our district workshops, that is one piece of the full range of things we're doing. So we're actually reaching out to a lot of folks just individually and through existing meetings and organizations as well. So that's really the main effort. But if you do want to see if there's people on the call, we're very open to any comments on the vision statements or anything related to the general plan as well.
Okay, excellent. And so good luck on the next series of engagements with the community. You guys are doing a great job. So do we have, Eileen, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we'll move on to 3.2, the Child Care Support Program update. Raisa.
Hey, this might be a short meeting for us today, unless we have a lot of stuff to say about childcare. So this, I just wanted to give you an update on where we are and who we've been meeting with on the childcare stuff. So super quick recap, we got $2 million sort of from the CARES Act funds, right? I think it's from general funds, but there were general funds freed up from the CARES Act. We came up with a two-part child care support pilot program. And the first part, we spent $600,000 on two efforts. And it was, the first was, working with First Five to provide grants that would see the existing childcare, those childcares that didn't close, childcare centers and family childcare slots that didn't close down due to COVID, just to get them through the pandemic as best we can. I have to get the final report from First Five to know how many people the grant supported, but our $500,000 went into their program that was leveraged by, I think they had a couple $100,000 left of their own funds for First Five. And then other organizations were incentivized to increase the grant program to also provide funds. I think there were about 5 organizations that ended up participating, and including like Sonoma County Foundation, or the Foundation of Sonoma County. And there was something like $1.5 million in grants given, but the money from Santa Rosa stayed within the city. And again, the bulk of childcare providers actually reside within the city. And then the other $100,000 went to 4 Cs because we also have a pipeline issue. And it was to double the amount of trainings they have to prepare childcare providers for licensing, or just to get them in and started up. And that's again for childcare providers within centers, but also home-based childcare, because those are that's the area where we have the most slots available. So that was the first phase. And then the second phase, we had always wanted to do something with facilities, some kind of a facility fund. And here's where Victoria and I have been working together to research and understand what's possible with and really how to leverage the remaining $1.4 million, because that's not a lot of money, but we were trying to figure out what would be the best use of those funds to spur and incentivize new contributions. And then how do you, what could we do with the fund so that it wasn't unlike a grant program where you use it once and then it's gone? How do you perpetuate the funds, right? So we've been researching and talking to a number of people, and we've met with developers, providers, early childcare education organizations like First 5 4Cs, and other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, for example. And what we came up with was, at least for a first phase, and Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong if we had other things, but we realized, okay, there's new facilities and existing facilities, and we are still getting calls for like, I either want to buy this facility, this childcare provider is going to go out of business, but I don't have the funds to buy it. So we want to salvage the existing facilities we can, or rehabilitate them. And then the other side is new facilities. And they both come down, like in talking to developers on what, and providers on what would make most sense, it comes down to a tenant improvement fund. Because on the new facility side, generally, they can't get loans. So a developer will build a shell, but the providers can't get the loans for the specific childcare kind of buildup that they need for the programming. And the programming is really different depending on the age that you're gearing towards. So infant is pretty different, and it's all very regulated, but infant build out is very different from toddler to older kid build out, right? So we came up with, at least for the start, that we can try to come up with a tenant improvement loan, right? But in speaking with, so the issues that we had with that, where, okay, with a loan, we have $1.4 million. Again, how do we increase those funds? And the other thing is, how do we structure something to where, you know, these organizations like childcare providers with really no margins in their business, to be able to afford even a low cost loan. And then the other things were, you know, are we the right organization to actually run this? Should this come out of the city, or who do we need to think about something like a RED or something like that for childcare, where there's a JPA who could actually run a loan program, or can we get involved with a bank or something like this? So on those two things, and speaking with First 5, so we immediately thought, well, could First 5 do it, because they do this? So I spoke with Angie Dillon-Shore, and they don't have one now, but First 5 used to run some kind of a loan program. And so she knows that they have it within their capabilities to do. It's not prohibitive, is what she said. And it's something that is of interest to them. But she's thinking at this point that could it be a collaborative effort with like RCU or one of our local banks, so that it could, you know, so that it can run it smoothly, and the entirety of the burden isn't on First 5. So recognizing right there, there's going to be a loan fund, but then we'd have to also address the fact that there's administrative costs to this. And again, we're starting to eat away at the 1.4 and again, increasing the need to get additional buy-in. The other thing we talked about is again, with the margins, most providers aren't able to accommodate sort of a large repayment. So it would have to be a below market, to no interest kind of loan program. And there, the thing that would be most sustainable, not most sustainable for the program, but for the organizations receiving these is there an option for forgiveness? And so these are the things that we're beginning to have to figure out is if it's a loan, what does it look like? How much can we actually loan out? What are the criteria? But then also, is there something like with our permits? We do charge for permits, but if the organization gets up and running and they prove that they're open for business, those permit fees are reimbursed. Is there a way to do something similar for this? But if we do it, then what does it mean to the sustainability of the fund? Okay, and then the other thing before I open this up for conversation is there are so many initiatives at the state and federal level that I cannot follow them. And Angie even said that she's having a hard time tracking what's happening at the state and federal level. So, I sort of floated this, like, can we just set those aside and those would be bonus? This can be a standalone thing, and hopefully there could be enough flexibility built into it that we can leverage whatever comes up from state and federal. And because if we're really looking at a loan program and then we look at next phases or building a program, I think we can build in that flexibility into it because they're in this tough spot now trying to understand what's coming down in the next 2 years in terms of funding, which will be competitive from state and federal. How do we set ourselves up to be most competitive? And what are the uses of those funds, right? The other thing that she's looking at, that First Five is looking at, is a 2022 ballot measure. And so this is where we began looking at what is a sustainable source of funding for either this program or other needs that would be complementary. And it would be a measure for infrastructure funding for ongoing ECE funding. And she was initially looking at it, or they, I should say, First Five, in terms of a wage parity question, because again, our pipeline is in dire straits right now, even though there are programs that are continuing to train people and get providers ready to provide this or open their own centers. They're earning $15-20 an hour, and they can earn more elsewhere. And we're finding that the pipeline, like if they'll come in for a couple of years and then they'll leave because they can't afford to have this job. And then the other thing is, she said, well, if we do get this funding, we pass this ballot, and she would like to work with the city of Santa Rosa, to promote this need for this ballot. She would put a little bit into facilities as well, because again, we need the both of them. So that pipeline question remains an issue, but it's less of an issue on training. And I'm hearing this throughout the Bay Area and talking to people. It's just like anything else at an entry-level wage thing. It's this is the biggest issue at the moment. And so I'm wondering, maybe we begin exploring something like we did with the minimum wage. Maybe it's an isolated, wage ordinance in Santa Rosa that sort of forces the question of what's a living wage for our childcare providers. They're not paid the same as like our teachers or things like that. So that became another question that's a little bit separate from the TI program. And then the other thing that we talked about is, well, two things, is the timeline for getting the program together. So I think we're starting to make those steps moving forward. And can we do it in advance of the 2022 ballot? that they're thinking of putting together, and what does that look like? And then eventually what other things feed into it. And then the last thing is, a longer term goal. And she pointed out that there's a place in King County, Washington, where they have Best Starts. It's a continuum program, and it's called Best Starts for Kids. And they look at 0 to 5, but then they look at the continuum, of needs thereafter, which are not necessarily based in the standard school-based systems. And so, in short, in summary, we're making progress too, and we've honed in on the tenant improvement grant, right? Or not grant, loan program. And we think we have a house for it. We have initial funds. Our next phases are getting additional, building the program out enough to get additional buy-in for it. And then eventually finding other sustainable inputs. And then the second piece of that is the longer term piece, because the tenant improvement item is only a first step in this next phase that we're doing. And that is all I have to tell you.
Well, thanks, Raisa. So that's a lot. You guys have come a long way. Victoria, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I want to thank Raisa and her team, as well as, the First Five, for doing all of this research. I mean, as you can see, it's so broad and variable, and there's, issues about capital and labor and, regulations and unknowns with state funding and how that's going to come down. So I'm just really appreciative that folks have been willing to take on such a complex topic. That and I also want to say, to our staff's credit, that I don't know of too many other, actually, I don't know if any other in the state of California jurisdictions, smaller than that at the state level, that are really looking at this stuff. I think maybe San Mateo or Santa Clara County, one of the counties in the peninsula, but we should really be proud that we're taking this on.
Yeah, you know what, actually, what's interesting is Oakland reached out because I mentioned it on a call, and she was like, can you tell me what you're doing? I mean, so they're not there. I think other jurisdictions are looking at it, but they haven't thought as creatively as we have about it yet.
Yeah. Well, it's really wonderful, because I know that when they hear this, it really gets other people to the table, which is my primary concern around this, because it is so big and broad. We really can't go it alone in the long run.
Well, really appreciate your effort there, Victoria, and of course the staff, and everyone that's in First Five, everyone that's involved in not only moving this forward, but getting other jurisdictions to understand the importance of it. So it's really, really important. Eddie, did you have any questions or comments on this?
No, sir. Just when we speak of how broad the situation is or the issue is, I think it speaks also to the different sectors of our community that it does affect. And although business we don't really associate with the childcare, it's greatly affected. And just seeing how broad the situation is, I just want to point it out that in the different sectors of our economy, it truly is broad.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
I have a question though, like on that, because it's a new piece of it, and I think from a policy perspective, could be looked at differently than the tenant improvement program. Is that that question of that wage parity or something like this? Like, I'm trying to figure out what an answer might be. It's interesting to me that First Five is looking at a ballot measure, and she hasn't really figured out how to answer that. But from a jurisdictional perspective, am I on the right track in thinking, is there like an ordinance thing? Like, I can't figure out how to begin addressing that piece of it.
Yeah. So, John, is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So when you said that, right, you said something that always sort of, bugs me. And I think about, how the system is really unfair for these people who work with children in daycare settings. And I was like, oh boy, once we start talking about this, how are we going to do the facilities thing? So when we were going to get into comments and questions, I was going to try to separate the two issues, because I think that that once we start getting into this, it's a worthwhile topic, but it's also one that I have never seen the public sector regulate pay and by industry. I've seen, minimum wages instituted and, contractors, compelled to pay their employees certain minimums based on working with a governmental agency. But I've never heard of anything like a government saying you can't pay in this industry below a certain amount. So I was unsure, like, how we're gonna conceptualize that in principle. Are we going to say that people who work in childcare, in entry-level childcare, are more valuable than people who work in, I don't know, other types of low-paid areas that require skill, dedication, and hard work that society doesn't value? Or are we going to look at other ways to reinforce the value and therefore increase the wage, but also provide business owners and operators with the supports that they need in order to pay their employees in a way that's sustainable? And that's where I come back to, like, well, can we ease the burden for them around tenant improvements, and can we make that a sustainable thing? Can we look for funding at the state level? And then I know the state has ongoing practices around increasing education requirements, and there's been increasing interest and progress, albeit very slow, in organizing and unionizing workers in that area. And so I think that given how tight the labor market is at this point, that at some point there will be, the demand will exceed the availability. And I'm hoping that there are things besides us coming in and saying, you can't pay somebody in this sector below a certain wage. My concern is if we do that, that operators are not going to be able to hack it. So
yeah, I mean, and I'm with you. I was like, I don't know. I had never heard, like, oh, this makes this much. I know that there are things where, I forget what they're called, but in the labor laws, where they have specific mandates for industry groups, but the minimum wage is always the same, right? But if you work in this group, then these are the considerations. I forget what those are called, like wage mandates or something like this.
Well, prevailing wage is, I mean, is kind of the concept that you might be thinking about, but that would be a government body putting in a project like the JC, for instance. They
Right.
can demand, if it's the government building it, you can demand prevailing wage, and it's that kind of model that I think could potentially work, but it does intrude into private enterprise. And unless we were paying, unless it was our project where we could demand prevailing wage in that kind of, at least that kind of model, I don't know. I think it would be probably, like you said, Victoria, a bit of an uphill battle, I think.
But it doesn't even make sense in a way, like if you think it through, because if you're demanding that they pay more, it's still like, well, then what's the overhead? Where's the pass through? So maybe it's actually not, an ordinance for that, but it's yet another, it's like the dual program of not just facility funds. So you decrease the cost of them to actually create the center through the tenant improvement, right? So that it takes that ongoing cost burden off of them, right? Or the initial, I should say, cost burden off of them. And then, because, we had talked about like a tuition guarantee, or how do you do, there's subsidized like vouchers or something like this, that certain people apply for, but there's a subsidy gap where you have people who still can't afford it. So is there a way to, in looking at it in that vein, I mean, it's still another program, but that's one where it can't perpetuate itself because it's just an output and there's no repaying. So where a tenant improvement loan can do this, then it's this question of ongoing funds to be able to pay to have some kind of a tuition guarantee so that they can actually afford to pay for their staff.
So one thing that a couple of ideas come to mind on that count. One is, one is the long range thing of working with the state to say, hey, for the vouchers, you need to bump up the amount. Another thing locally is if there were a measure and that we were going to support, saying something like, maybe we would do a voucher, a gap voucher or something, with a stipulation that, if you accept these gap vouchers, it's really about, like when you pay now, when you go to a restaurant, they add, a lot of places are starting to just add the gratuity into it. And, they add a back of house fee and so forth. So, perhaps we could essentially make the gap vouchers intended to help subsidize employee wages. And we could say, with this is intended to help you pay X amount of dollars to your employees.
And then, so maybe actually then, because like what role does the city have? We don't have funds to do an ongoing contribution, right? So then maybe it is saying to, first five, if they do put that ballot measure in, look, just focus it in on that wage issue. So that we can, or focus it on, not on the wage issue, but focus it in on the pipeline issue. And wage is a piece of that pipeline issue. And then we can then continue to look at solely at the funds or the cities themselves, because if First Five runs this, it's not going to just be for us, but it would be returned to source. And we can just focus then on the tenant improvement piece of it and other structural or infrastructure elements of it. And then that's a fine line and it keeps us within our lane.
One other thing, and this is kind of philosophical and esoteric, so I appreciate you and my colleagues bearing with me on this, but the real reason why that these wages are so low is not just because the employees are female and people of color. That is one significant element, but the other is because people widely consider childcare to be, on the margins of a working woman's earnings. So, we're not looking at the man's earnings in general. People are assessing whether or not that it makes economic sense for a mother to go to work versus care for children at home. And so to the extent that we can work with the chamber and our partners around changing the narrative, if we ever do get something to the ballot, I would really suggest, marketing this as not just an economic benefit to women, but an economic benefit to our businesses and to working men as well. And I'd get a picture of Jack going to work with his baby strapped to him or something like that. I think we really have to start to reimagine what the purpose of this is, because to my mind, it's not just about helping women in the workforce, but it's also, as I think we all know, strongly tied to future economic development for the children who get to go to high quality daycare. And when they do that, the cost to society down the road is so greatly reduced in terms of prison and remediation and so forth. But it's sort of stuck in this place that it's all about the parent. And if we can shift that to it being about the economy and about the child, I think that, we'll be part of a really long-term change in understanding the value of it. And that will drive wages up when people see the value in it for everybody.
Well, I think you just nailed it. Upstream investment is always difficult to achieve because people are slow to understand the value. And you're right. We're talking about the future, our future when we talk about our kids, and the better their education, and the better their exposure to nurturing adults and other kids for that matter, the better off the entire society is. But it is, you're right. It's a major upstream investment, and it affects all the things you just mentioned. And it is a challenge. It's always a challenge. There's always a payoff. It's slow but steady payoff, but it's a challenge to get people to buy in the beginning. It's the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
I just had an idea. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Raisa, go ahead.
And
Well,
before you go, Race, I hate to interrupt, but we probably need to in the future, we're going to have to not have meetings at 10 o'clock when we have a 12 o'clock council meeting.
Yeah.
Which we didn't know, and we didn't know we were going to have closed session until it happened. So we're going to have to watch our agenda, because we're at 10:45 and we have to be at City Hall between 11:30 and 12. So we're starting.
I think we can cut this out done. I think we're almost finished. I just want to say I have just one thought that that I'll bring back later when we do this, and that is maybe there's a way to do greater incentives to employer-based childcare where the provider is either an employee of that employer-based childcare site, like Keysite, and paid at a higher level, and then they get the benefits and stuff like that, or some kind of thing where, again, with the employer-based thing, maybe there's a way to be able to show the ability. And I think, again, that's a place where we can play, and we can maybe build that into the system.
Yeah, that sounds like an opportunity there. I like that.
Yeah. So this gives me enough, and I know, Eddie, you wanted to say something.
For me, I was pretty much saying that this conversation is identical to the ones that we have about teachers. They're a great contribution to society, yet they're very poorly compensated. And my suggestion is being newly involved in as an elected official is what has worked for the teachers organizations, for the teachers union to increase their pay. I know very, very little, as we know that they're still very poorly paid, but it's definitely, I see it as identical conversation that we're having.
Yeah, you're right. Very close. It's totally tied, actually. I see them as parallel tracks. Well, I need to go to the community and see if there's anyone from the public, Eileen, that would like to address this.
We do not have any raised hands at this time.
Okay, well, I'm gonna jump in and ask for Raisa. I think this is already in the works, but short-term rentals and how that might be coming back to the economic development.
So that's on the August agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, and we will not have a meeting in July. So the next meeting is August, and it will be short-term rentals. And just because I think you probably all received that. The emails that we received from this last weekend have been responded to.
It's just quite. I mean, my heart goes out to people that are being victimized by bad players. It's just really, and I didn't even know it was happening. I mean, it's like, I guess the situation that we're talking about, which I'm sure you all got maybe not. Did everyone get emails this weekend about a situation with a large home? Anyway, it's really kind of devastating to this particular neighborhood, and we need to address it. We need to have a conversation about it. So we'll get it on the agenda as soon as possible. It sounds like it's going to hit in August. And the staff is gathering information and data to help us with our conversation and how we might be recommending something to full council. And staff is working on the issue itself as we might be talking about it. Staff is also working on what they can do given our current ordinances to try to alleviate some of the pain being suffered by some of the neighbors of these bad players. So I think that'll just about do it, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks, you guys. Good, short but very valuable conversation. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.